click the globe interpretation icon in the Zoom toolbar at the bottom of the screen and select French. To only hear the French interpretation and not the original audio, you can select Mute Original Audio in the interpretation menu. Our interpreters will now also give these instructions in French to the entire audience before moving to the interpretation audio channel.
Bienvenue à tous et à toutes. Avant de commencer, je tiens à souligner que l'atelier sera enregistré et interprété en français. Pour accéder au service d'interprétation, veuillez cliquer sur l'icône d'interprétation en forme de globe qui se trouve sur la barre d'outils Zoom au niveau du bas de l'écran et sélectionner le français. Pour n'entendre que l'interprétation en français sans l'audio original, vous pouvez sélectionner Couper le son d'origine dans le menu d'interprétation.
Thank you, and we will now begin.
Good morning and welcome to today's California and Quebec workshop on the Joint Cap and Trade programs. My name is Rajinder Sahota and I am the Deputy Executive Officer at CARB and oversee the Cap and Trade program. I am joined by my colleagues, Jeannie Benoit, Director General, and Kim Ricard, Director of the Carbon Market Division, who leads the Quebec Cap and Trade program. We will make a few introductory comments before handing off to the team to present the slides. We are kicking off this process as we had indicated we would in the market notice that was posted in February, and because we have just completed the most recent scoping plan. You have seen the materials and will notice that there are only scenarios to adjust caps moving forward and ensure the program is made more stringent to help achieve either the SB 32 target, the target in the latest scoping plan, and looking at an upper ambition. There is no status quo scenario, so I want to be clear, we are talking about tightening the program to increase ambition for this decade and beyond. These scenarios reflect the technical work we will do to inform a final staff proposal to the board. As such, the final proposed rule and alternatives may not include all of the scenarios evaluated or may include others that we include along the way. I also want to stress that unless we as the administrator make a public announcement or post something to our website, it's most likely a rumor. And I can assure you that no one has inside access to the materials and team, and we don't share information with just one party unless it's already public and made available from us. As you all know, the California and Quebec programs have been successfully linked for about a decade. As such, we will be doing some joint market analyses and workshops over the coming months. We also each have topics we will workshop separately within our own jurisdictions, respecting our unique legislative and internal needs. In the end, we will work to ensure we remain a linked program. I'd like to invite my colleague, Jean-Yves, to make any introductory comments. Jean-Yves?
Thank you, Rajinder. It's a pleasure for us, Kim and I, to be here today and participate in your webinar. Quebec, California have been collaborating for more than a decade now on the development and the implementation of our carbon market. And we are looking forward to keep working in close collaboration with you and your team in assessing and improving some features of our respective cap and trade program that are for both of us at the center of our climate action. From 11:30 to 1 Pacific time today, Quebec will also be hosting a similar webinar. Unfortunately, it will be in French only on elements that we are evaluating for Quebec's cap and trade system. More information, including the link to assist to the webinar, no registration is required, can be found on Quebec's cap and trade program main webpage. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeannie. And now we will turn it over to program staff for introductions and to present the slides. Team?
Good morning, Mark Cipolla. I am the Chief of the California Cap and Trade Program. Welcome. Thank you very much for joining us today. And also joining is Rachel Gold. She is a manager within the Cap and Trade Program, and I'll hand it off to Rachel to quickly introduce herself.
Good morning, Rachel Gold. I'm the manager of the allowance allocation section in the Cap and Trade Program. It's wonderful to have so much participation today and look forward to engaging with all of you in this process.
And hi, I am Camille Sultana, and I'm an air pollution specialist within the program and development section of the Cap and Trade program, and I will be giving CARB staff presentation today. So we will begin. Before we begin, I will go over some logistics. This workshop is being recorded and will be posted to our Cap and Trade meetings and workshops page. We have 2.5 hours allotted. And first, I will go through the full slide deck, and then we will open it up for feedback and questions at the end. If you plan to comment, we recommend that you raise your hand by 10 a.m. Pacific time. We have a great turnout with over 400 attendees, and we will work to hear from as many commenters as possible. So we ask stakeholders to keep their feedback to no longer than 3 minutes and to submit longer comments in writing. Stakeholders will be able to submit written feedback online until July 7th at 11:59 p.m. Pacific time. You can find a link to submit feedback, as well as all relevant documents, including this presentation, on our Cap and Trade meetings and workshops page. The objective of today's workshop is to discuss potential updates to the Cap and Trade program, reflective of implementation needs and the state's climate policies. We will start with background on California's participation in a linked carbon market, California climate policy, the 2022 scoping plan update, the Cap and Trade program, and the public process for updates. Staff will then present joint California-Quebec efforts to review and update the linked carbon markets, followed by California-specific potential updates before opening up to public comments. The California Cap and Trade program and Quebec Cap and Trade system have been linked since January 2014, holding 35 joint allowance auctions as of June 2023. This linkage is made possible by consistent market rules and enables compliance instruments to be traded and used interchangeably across the two programs. Together with Quebec, we work with WCI Inc., an external not-for-profit corporation that supports the administration of the market registry, auctions, and financial services for the joint programs. WCI Inc. also provides a platform that can be expanded to additional jurisdictions. Both California and Quebec retain all regulatory and policy control and full oversight authority over their respective programs. At the highest level, California's climate policies are determined by state legislation and executive orders. These statutes and directives establish both statewide greenhouse gas targets or sector-specific goals, which inform CARB's climate change scoping plan and individual policies and regulations. CARB is required by statute to develop and regularly update its climate change scoping plan, which is an actionable plan to meet the statewide greenhouse gas emissions reduction targets. Each scoping plan is a high-level document spanning all sectors to lay out a comprehensive framework of how the pieces of the state's climate strategy fit together. CARB's board adopted the most recent scoping plan update in December of last year, and it charts the path to carbon neutrality and reducing anthropogenic emissions by 85% by 2045, in alignment with AB 1279. After each scoping plan is approved, CARB and other state agencies review, update, or develop new regulations and programs to align with the actions in the plan based on established rules and authority. For CARB, that means staff will bring forth many regulations and programs, each with their own public process, for the board's consideration to help implement the plan. And once regulations and programs are in effect, a critical step is for projects to get built to put the plan into on-the-ground action. This slide helps to put the state's climate goals into perspective. The line graph on the left shows annual emissions from 2000 to 2020 and California's statutory greenhouse gas emissions reduction targets for 2020, 2030, and 2045. The greenhouse gas emission inventory shows that California achieved the 2020 AB 32 target of returning to 1990 emissions levels in 2014 and has remained below the target through 2020. In 2016, the legislature called for a 40% reduction in emissions below 1990 levels by 2030. And recently, in 2022, AB 1279 established two goals: to reduce anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions by 85% by 2045 compared to 1990 levels, and to achieve carbon neutrality no later than 2045, meaning that for whatever emission sources exist at that point, there is an equivalent or greater amount of natural and technological carbon sinks. This ambition is evidenced within the 2022 Scoping Plan update, which identifies a need to accelerate the 2030 target to 48% below 1990 levels to be on track to meet AB 1279 goals. This slide summarizes some of the findings in the 2022 Scoping Plan update. For 2030, the Scoping Plan scenario shows a need to increase ambition from the SB 32 40% emissions reduction target to 48%. The Scoping Plan requires unprecedented build-out of low-carbon technologies, energy sources, and infrastructure this decade. This ambitious transformation will be enabled by large commitments of state and federal funding. The Scoping Plan scenario also meets the AB 1279 call for an 85% reduction in anthropogenic emissions by 2045. To ensure meeting this goal in the Scoping Plan, carbon capture and sequestration is included to address emissions from limited sectors, including electricity generation, cement production facilities, and refineries. Even with this level of emissions reduction, California will still have residual emissions from sources like hydrofluorocarbons used in refrigerants and emissions from waste in natural and working lands. This is where carbon dioxide removal options are needed to achieve carbon neutrality. Since the adoption of the first Scoping Plan in 2008, carbon pricing in the form of a cap and trade program has been part of California's successful portfolio approach to achieving the state's greenhouse gas emissions reduction targets, and it will remain critical as we work toward carbon neutrality. The cap and trade program establishes a declining cap on statewide greenhouse gas emissions from major sources, covering about 80% of total statewide emissions. The cap is set according to California's greenhouse gas goals. CARB creates allowances equal to the cap each year, with one allowance equal to 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide equivalent, or CO2e. Each entity covered by the program has a compliance obligation that is set by its greenhouse gas emissions, and entities are required to meet that compliance obligation by acquiring and surrendering allowances or a limited quantity of offset credits in an amount equal to their compliance obligation. Because the cap declines, fewer allowances are created each year, and overall emissions decrease over time. This helps establish a steadily increasing price signal, which facilitates addressing the lowest cost reductions first. Long-term, the cap and trade program provides a price signal to invest in cleaner technologies. The cap and trade program is also the sole funding source for the California Climate Investments Program, or CCI, and also funds implementation of AB 617. California Climate Investments is a statewide initiative that invests proceeds from the sale of state-owned allowances into programs that help reduce greenhouse gas emissions and improve public health and the environment in California. Through November 2022, over 70% of the $9 billion implemented have been directed to priority populations, including disadvantaged communities, low-income communities, and low-income households. As shown in the infographic, CCI programs include a diversity of projects benefiting Californians, including funding for over 400,000 zero emissions and plug-in hybrid vehicle rebates, 3.6 billion kilowatt hours of renewable electricity generation, and the planting of 200,000 urban trees. Cumulatively, CCI projects have reduced an estimated 97 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent and over 80,000 tons of criteria air pollutants. The 2022 Scoping Plan stated that the cap and trade program should support an increased ambition for 2030 while retaining the ability to scale as other factors, such as changing economic conditions and implementation of complementary climate programs, also impact emissions. Any changes to the program must continue to support a well-designed system that continues to send a steadily increasing price signal, minimizes for leakage, is cost-effective and technologically feasible, and avoids energy rate spikes due to carbon pricing. Importantly, the program should support air quality benefits and not exacerbate existing air quality disparities. With that backdrop, we want to show how the Cap and Trade program fits into broader state climate policy, where we are today, and what the next steps are to updating the Cap and Trade program and the linked carbon market. This slide shows an abbreviated history of California's Cap and Trade program. The program is rooted in AB 32 passed in 2006. AB 32 not only set a greenhouse gas emissions target for 2020, as discussed earlier, it also authorized a market-based approach for reducing emissions. Multi-year development activities began in 2007 with a robust public process, including 40 informal public meetings with industry, environmental groups, academics, and other government agencies. After these informal engagements, California began a formal rulemaking process, which concluded with adoption in 2011. The program launched in 2012 in preparation for compliance obligations starting for 2013 emissions, which initially included stationary facilities and imported electricity, and expanded to include suppliers of natural gas and transportation fuels in 2015. Since adoption, the California Cap and Trade program has continued to evolve. Following a rulemaking initiated in 2012, California and Quebec established a joint market program in 2014. Significant program updates in 2018 followed the 2017 scoping plan and were responsive to legislative direction in AB 398. In total, CARB has amended the program 8 times, consistent with CARB's general practice of updating its programs in response to new legislation and implementation experience. Each 5-year update to the scoping plan allows California to assess progress on achieving the state's climate targets and new legislation. As discussed earlier, the 2022 scoping plan incorporates executive orders, legislative direction, and board direction to lay out a technologically feasible and cost-effective path to carbon neutrality. The economy-wide modeling in the 2022 scoping plan will be key to informing review and updates of the Cap and Trade program, just as we use the 2017 scoping plan update for the 2018 regulatory amendments. Within each scoping plan, the Cap and Trade program's economy-wide carbon price has been complemented by California's suite of sector-specific regulations and incentives to support achieving the needed transformation. Review of the Cap and Trade program will also reflect accounting of greenhouse gases in the latest AB 32 greenhouse gas emission inventory. The inventory published in 2022 included adjustment to align emissions from all sectors with third-party verified data. Staff will also continue to assess potential updates based on implementation needs and ongoing experience. The scoping plan, evolving state policy, and updated greenhouse gas inventory and implementation experience will all inform the process to update the Cap and Trade program. This meeting is the second in a series of informal workshops where we will present information about the existing Cap and Trade program, discuss concepts for new and updated provisions, and invite stakeholders and the public to inform this development phase. Public engagement during this informal period is important in the construction of the formal rulemaking package. The formal rulemaking is a regulatory process defined by certain milestones and has specific timelines. The initial rulemaking package will be announced by a formal and coordinated public notice. It will include proposed regulatory text, an initial statement of reasons or ISOR that describes the rationale for proposed changes, and economic and environmental analyses. Once we release the initial package, CARB has 1 year to submit rulemaking record to the Office of Administrative Law. The rulemaking package will include separate environmental and economic analyses as required by statute. The environmental analysis will meet requirements of the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, and includes alternative scenario analyses and feasible mitigation measures to reduce or avoid significant impacts, if any are identified. The standardized regulatory impact assessment discloses the economic impact of a proposed major regulation. It includes analysis of the cost, benefits, and macroeconomic impacts of the proposed regulation and 2 additional regulatory alternatives. For potential program updates presented today, we will first discuss joint California-Quebec efforts to review and update their respective carbon markets. Topics include allowance cost evaluations, market rules, cost containment, and carbon dioxide removal and sequestration. These elements impact all market participants across the linked market, and therefore any updates need to be informed by consistent and coordinated work across the 2 jurisdictions. This slide shows the cap and trade program's annual allowance budgets through 2030. The caps drop about 4% each year from 2020 through 2030. This plot also shows how allowances are distributed to the market. CARB distributes allowances through 2 primary mechanisms: direct allocation to industry and electric and natural gas utilities, and sale at auction to all market participants. A small percentage of the allowance budgets are also placed into a cost containment reserve, which are the small green bars at the top. Quebec and California have initiated 2 separate efforts to independently evaluate allowance supply and demand scenarios for the joint market, with the goal of providing allowance cost information under a variety of scenarios utilizing different modeling approaches. Some supply and demand scenarios will be common to both teams, and some will be unique to each jurisdiction. Having the same scenarios modeled by different approaches will provide an indication of the uncertainty inherent in this type of effort. Each independent model has uncertainty, its own structural differences, and different outputs. Quebec and California's modeling work will also help illustrate the potential impact of unused allowances in the context of the modeled scenarios. Unused allowances represent approximately 5% of the total number of vintage 2013 through 2030 allowances issued within the joint market. Both Quebec and California will consider a range of model scenarios for 2030 and evaluate the joint market through 2045. The included scenarios will model allowance supply and demand when setting 2030 greenhouse gas emissions reduction targets at 40, 48, or 55%, all with and without the AB 1279 reduction target of 85% in 2045. The 40% by 2030 scenario is consistent with the 2030 target in statute and will evaluate the impact of reflecting recent adjustments made to the AB 32 greenhouse gas emission inventory. The 48% by 2030 scenario is informed by the increased ambition that the 2022 scoping plan modeling indicates is needed to be consistent with achieving carbon neutrality by 2045. And the 55% by 2030 scenario will help illustrate an upper bound on ambition for 2030. Quebec and California are also evaluating various market rule provisions, some of which are impacted by allowance budgets. Changes to market rules must be coordinated across jurisdictions to ensure consistency within the joint market. Any adjustment to allowance budgets may prompt staff to evaluate the holding limit calculation and the allowance price containment reserve and price ceiling levels. Additionally, staff are investigating whether current corporate association triggers and disclosure requirements are sufficient to protect against market manipulation. These will all be a part of future workshops if changes are warranted. The joint market could also be impacted by the inclusion of carbon dioxide removal and sequestration within either program. This slide includes recent California policy updates regarding mechanical carbon removal and sequestration. The process to develop the scoping plan included direction from Governor Newsom to set carbon dioxide removal and capture targets, which was incorporated in the final 2022 scoping plan update and summarized in this slide. In parallel, the legislature passed SB 905. SB 905 requires CARB to establish a carbon capture removal, utilization, and storage program to evaluate, demonstrate, and regulate CCS and CDR projects in coordination with other state agencies. SB 905 includes several key requirements for projects within California, including prohibiting CCS or CDR to facilitate enhanced oil recovery. Currently, CCS and CDR are not recognized in the cap and trade regulation. CARB staff will evaluate the treatment of CCS and CDR within the cap and trade program to support actions called for by the 2022 scoping plan update. In addition to joint California-Quebec evaluations, CARB will also be reviewing and potentially updating other aspects of the cap and trade program. This California-specific work includes emissions leakage studies of the electricity and industrial sectors, coordination with CAISO of the extended day-ahead market for electricity, and updates to offset protocols based on the latest science. Pursuant to AB 32, CARB designed the cap and trade program to minimize the potential for emissions leakage. Emissions leakage is a decrease in greenhouse gas emissions in state with the corresponding increase in out-of-state greenhouse gas emissions. Since program adoption in 2011, design elements to minimize leakage have included industrial allocation to incentivize maintaining efficient production within California, a consistent carbon price signal for all electricity used to serve California, and prohibitions against shuffling imported electricity resources to lower compliance obligations within the cap and trade program. With passage of AB 398 in 2017, the California legislature prioritized maximizing the program's industrial leakage protection mechanism. Accordingly, in 2018, CARB set the assistance factors for industrial leakage protection to 100% for the third compliance period and through 2030. CARB has commissioned 2 studies to provide in-depth evaluations of emissions leakage related to the cap and trade program. The industrial sector study will assess the future emissions leakage risk potentially posed to industrial facilities by the program and evaluate possible changes to reduce leakage risk given changing international markets and the need for accelerated greenhouse gas emissions reductions identified in the scoping plan update. The study will provide CARB with a robust analytical foundation to produce a report on program leakage to the legislature in 2025 as required by AB 398. In 2021, the Independent Emissions Market Advisory Committee's annual report recommended that CARB expand its practice of conducting retrospective assessments of emissions leakage. With a decade of implementing the program and in alignment with this recommendation, CARB has contracted for a study to understand whether there has been emissions leakage in the electricity sector outside of the energy imbalance market and the magnitude and extent of any leakage over time. The electricity sector leakage study will also work to identify key drivers of such leakage and evaluate potential measures to reduce leakage risk. These studies will be completed in early 2025 and may inform future program changes. Within CARB's existing accounting framework, electricity importers, or first jurisdictional deliverers, report imports based on physical delivery of electricity by source and are responsible for corresponding compliance obligations. This approach meets CARB's requirements under AB 32 to accurately account for all of California's emissions and to minimize the potential for emissions leakage. In 2015, CARB found that the design of the California Independent System Operators, or CAISO's, real-time energy market, the Energy Imbalance Market, or EIM, resulted in emissions leakage. CAISO and CARB worked collaboratively to understand this issue and develop a solution. Since then, CAISO has implemented an improvement to ensure greater greenhouse gas accounting accuracy in the EIM, and CARB adopted provisions in its regulations to ensure any EIM emissions leakage is fully accounted for and addressed. In February 2023, CAISO adopted a final proposal for an extended day-ahead market, or EDAM, that builds on the existing real-time EIM. The final proposal includes a resource-specific approach similar to EIM and includes elements designed to mitigate emissions leakage in both EDAM and EIM. CARB staff has been actively coordinating with CAISO on EDAM, and CARB staff is in the process of evaluating changes in CARB's regulations that may be necessary to cover EDAM transactions and account for potential emissions leakage based on the greenhouse gas design in CAISO's adopted EDAM proposal. Any potential future changes to CARB's greenhouse gas accounting for electricity imports must continue to meet existing state and federal statutory requirements and support implementation of CARB's programs. The Cap and Trade program also reduces greenhouse gas emissions and provides environmental benefits to California through the Compliance Offset Program. This slide presents an overview of the existing Compliance Offsets Program, which is an important cost containment element within Cap and Trade, whose program design has been successfully litigated in court. Offset credits represent verified greenhouse gas emissions reductions or removal enhancements made in sources outside of the sources covered in the program. Per AB 32, reductions associated with offsets must be real, permanent, quantifiable, verifiable, enforceable, and additional to any regulation and reduction that otherwise would occur. CARB issues offset credits to qualifying projects pursuant to 6 board-approved compliance offset protocols. Covered entities may use offset credits to satisfy a small percentage of their overall compliance obligation, called the quantitative usage limit. Compliance entities may use offset credits to meet up to 4% of their compliance obligation for emissions during 2021 through 2025, and 6% for emissions during 2026 through 2030. Consistent with AB 398, starting with 2021 emissions, no more than 1/2 of the quantitative usage limit may be sourced from projects that do not provide direct environmental benefits in the state. CARB is committed to regularly reviewing and updating offset protocols with the latest information, science, and lessons learned from implementation. The most recent versions of the livestock offset protocol and ozone depleting substances protocol were adopted in November 2014. CARB is considering updates to these protocols based on the best available science. CARB also held an initial workshop on the U.S. Forest Protocol in November 2022, and has also established a contract to assess forest wildfire and disease risks. This study will be completed in 2024 and may inform future forest protocol changes, potentially trailing the Cap and Trade rulemaking process. In addition to emissions leakage assessments, adjustments to imported electricity accounting, and offset protocol updates, CARB is also considering other potential updates reflective of implementation needs and the state's climate policies. These topics may include, but are not limited to, eligibility requirements for exemptions for biogenic CO2 emissions from consumption of biogenic fuels, mechanisms to further incentivize industrial decarbonization, review of ratepayer and low-income protections provided by utility allocation, and any necessary corresponding changes to the regulation for the mandatory reporting of greenhouse gas emissions, or MRR. Quebec will also evaluate several topics specific to their cap and trade system, including but not limited to the bullets listed here. Quebec will assess the publication of market data to improve transparency and promote a better understanding of the market to various stakeholders. Quebec will evaluate how to facilitate reporting of CO2 transfers between entities in order to value biofuels and carbon capture utilization and storage projects and avoid double counting. Quebec will also investigate if global warming potentials from the 5th IPCC report should be integrated into their carbon market regulation to harmonize with national inventories. And Quebec will also evaluate the implementation of annual partial compliance events and whether the timing of compliance events should be modified to match mitigation target years. Quebec will also investigate the role of offsets within their cap and trade system. This evaluation will include assessing if the limit on the use of offset credits should be modified to maximize emissions reductions in covered sectors, and the role of offset credits for the post-2030 period in the context of carbon neutrality for 2050. Quebec will investigate how offset credits can be used to better contribute to a net zero objective. Quebec will also evaluate the treatment of biofuels and CCS in a carbon market and how biofuels and CCS can be most efficiently treated under the reporting regulations. For more information on the Quebec Cap and Trade system, please visit their program page. We'll now move into the feedback portion of the workshop. As a reminder, if you would like to share feedback or ask questions, please use the raise hand function, which should be located on the toolbar at the bottom of your Zoom window as shown. When staff calls your name and activates your audio controls, please click the unmute button that will appear and proceed to introduce yourself and provide your comment. Stakeholders will also be able to submit written feedback online until July 7th at 11:59 p.m. Pacific time. You can find a link to submit feedback as well as all relevant documents in our Cap and Trade meetings and workshops page. As a reminder, we are limiting comments today to 3 minutes to accommodate as many people as we can. And we also have a timer on the top right of the slide so that you know how much time is remaining. With that, I will now pass things to my colleague, Michael Turgan, who will be facilitating the public comment session.
Thank you, Camille. It looks like at this time, we only have 2 hands up. So we will proceed with those commenters. And so our first commenter will be Caroline Jones. Caroline, I have allowed you to unmute yourself, so please hit the unmute button and proceed to provide your comment.
Hi, thank you. I'm Caroline Jones with Environmental Defense Fund. EDF is excited that CARB is undertaking this workshop in rulemaking, which is a huge opportunity to start implementing the increased near-term ambition of achieving 48% reductions by 2030 as identified in the scoping plan update. Meeting these goals is critical to protecting communities from the most devastating climate change impacts, and we commend CARB for starting this important process with the urgency required, and we further urge the agency to ensure that any changes to the program go into effect no later than 2025 on January 1st. As California and Quebec explore ways to strengthen their joint program through increased near-term ambition, strategies for improving cap and trade to address local air pollution should also be considered. Other potential program adjustments include introducing facility-level caps on polluters operating in vulnerable communities, creating an emissions containment reserve, and requiring that offset credits are counted beneath the set limit of emissions and rather than in addition to allowances. This workshop in rulemaking is also a timely opportunity for California and Quebec to discuss their process and considerations for linkage with Washington's cap and invest market. Washington's Department of Ecology is expected to release a decision on their plans to pursue linkage this fall. With the need for ambitious action more apparent than ever, California and Quebec should ensure that they're preparing their own processes to explore the steps needed and opportunities to create scaled up regional action on climate change through a broader market by linking with Washington or others. Thank you again for the work that you've done to initiate this important process, and we look forward to working with you to update this critical piece of policy.
Thanks, Caroline, for those comments. I want to just reflect back on a couple of the things that you highlighted. At this time, we are focused on updates to our program to make sure that we're aligned with the ambition called for in the scoping plan, achieving the 2030 statutory target. And so linkage is a potential option for us, but it's not the primary driver for these amendments right now. And so as you saw in the deck, we are still focused on what our program needs to do and what it needs to be structured to look like to achieve our outcomes here in California. The other thing was the list of potential changes that you identified. I think that it's great to be able to list each of those individually, but we have to think of the program as one comprehensive system. So as we work through the scenarios that we need to build to be in alignment with the work that and targets we need to have in California, we can look at some of those options, but they have to be part of a broader look at the program. If we continue to just add this feature and that feature and not care about what it looks in total, that could be a problem for the market. And we'd like to have a steady and stable market here in California, like the steady and stable market that we've had for the last decade or so. Thank you.
Great. Okay, we will move to our next commenter. The next hand up I see is Mikhail Svarla. Mikhail, I have allowed you to talk. You may now unmute yourself and provide your comments.
Yeah, Mikhail Svarla here on behalf of California Council for Environmental Economic Balance. Appreciate the workshop today and look forward to the upcoming rulemaking. New application of the state of California from AB 1279, in addition to what was discovered in the scoping plan and laid out there. I want to kind of echo the comments from Ms. Hoda on making sure that the system works as a whole. Pointing to Washington, we've seen already in their first APCR tier, and would warn that kind of the program design there is not one that may have long-lasting support, just due to the nature of where they're. So to that end, look forward to modeling and going down the path of different enhancements to ensure that we're achieving our 2030 and 2045 goals. And excited that we're kicking this off today. Thanks.
Thanks, Mick. I think you cut out there a few times, but I think the gist was looking forward to the rulemaking, raising some concerns or observations about the Washington program, and reiterating the look for a comprehensive view at the program. So I'm hoping I got that all.
I suppose we will move to our next comment, and anyone, you could also feel free to raise your hand again later on and get in line. Okay, so our next commenter will be Brian Beering. Brian, I have allowed you to talk. You may now unmute yourself and provide your comments.
Good morning, this is Brian Beering with Ellison Schneider. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
All right, great. So my question was in relation to the emissions leakage study that was outlined on slides 24, 25, 26. Great to see that you guys are kicking this off regularly. I guess the first question was, whether or not the study will really focus on domestic leakage as distinguished from international leakage. I know there was some work that was done on this back in 2014, 2015 timeframe, but curious if that would be part of the scope here. And then the second question was really just on the timing of all of this and when we might expect to see some workshops on these issues.
Hi, Brian, Mark Cipolla. Thanks for the questions. Just to clarify the situation here, we do have two separate studies, one focusing on industrial leakage related to the program, which is a little more forward-looking, and we've also got a second study looking at the electricity sector, which is a little more retrospective looking. We expect both of these to fold into the leakage report, which is required by AB 398. That's due December 2025. So we have just initiated both of these contracts with a view towards wrapping them up to inform that report due at the end of 2025. So that's the timing. And related to views on looking at international versus domestic leakage, we do want to look at both of those. So, I anticipate that, especially obviously with the electricity sector, that's related to domestic leakage. On the industrial side, we expect that the disparity in carbon pricing to exist for a little bit more in the US. So there will be an examination of, a comprehensive look at leakage pressures associated with the program. So that will involve looking at the domestic side and the international side. We want to factor in some of the evolution going forward in terms of trade exposures in terms of evolving carbon pricing and in terms of the evolving technologies that may be available for reducing emissions and therefore, shifting the leakage pressures that are faced by different individual industrial sectors.
Great. With that, we will move to our next commenter, who is Cindy Parsons. So Cindy, I have allowed you to unmute yourself. Please do so and then provide your comment.
Hi, this is Cindy Parsons. I'm with the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. And I have a question related to addressing leakage in the EIM and EDAM markets. Last year, there was a lot of discussion during the stakeholder process about the GHG accounting approach. And there were several alternative approaches that were discussed during the stakeholder process. And my question specifically is related to the first jurisdictional deliverer interpretation. And did look up the definition of first jurisdictional deliverer, which is defined in the Western Climate Initiative technical document. And it says the owner or operator of an electricity source in a partner jurisdiction or an electricity importer that is jurisdictional to the program authority or the immediate downstream purchaser or recipient of electricity from a non-jurisdictional electricity importer. And so the question that I have is whether, based on that definition, if CARB would consider looking at one of those alternative approaches to the first jurisdictional deliverer specific to the EIM and EDAM markets. And I believe that looking at a different interpretation rather than just the electricity generator, of looking at it as the immediate downstream purchaser or recipient of the electricity as the first jurisdictional deliverer, that would open the door to exploring an alternative approach to GHG reporting and compliance that may provide a better solution to the leakage and the secondary dispatch issue. So that is my question. Thank you.
Cindy, I can take that question. First, we don't have the definitions in front of us, and the definitions that are in our regulation were carefully crafted in collaboration with DOJ and our sister agencies. And so it's hard for us in real time to check the exact words across our reg and what's in the WCI design documents. In terms of other options, we're open to looking at other options, but they have to be options that work for our accounting purposes and statute and the implementation of our programs first and foremost. If there are benefits to help on leakage, we absolutely want to be aware of that and want to take that into consideration. But we are not at this time going to be able to say, yes, we're open to option A, B, or any of the others. This is an ongoing conversation between the energy agencies, ourselves, and the CAISO.
Okay, great. We will now move to our next commenter, who is Townsend Colley. Townsend, I have allowed you to unmute yourself. You may now do so and provide your comment.
Thanks, Michael. This is Townsend. I really appreciate you guys doing this call and letting us kind of give our comments and look forward to the rulemaking. I guess my main question is looking at both the Quebec and the California decks here. There's definitely a bit of commentary on the banking of allowances. So I guess part one of my question would be, does CARB have any concerns right now about the level of allowances that are being banked? And I guess the second part would be, should we expect that in the upcoming rulemaking, any potential changes to the banking of allowances? Will that be a significant part of the rulemaking? Thank you, guys.
So I can take that question. We're looking at scenarios for making the program more stringent to 2030, and then evaluating the potential caps that would be needed out to 2045. As part of that, we will look at the 5% unbanked allowances. And so at this time, we don't have anything to share on whether we see any concerns or not, because that work on the overall stringency of the scenarios is underway. What is clear is that if we are going to make the program more stringent, we are going to have to take some allowances out of circulation. We are not going to be looking to take allowances out of people's accounts. It means we have to look at allowances across the different pools in which they're held. That is allowances that can go to allocation, allowances that can go to auction, allowances that can go to the price containment reserve and price ceiling. And so all of those pools will be looked at as we think about what it means to make the program more stringent, and what it means to reduce the caps to make sure that stringency is captured in the design of the program. And so to the question about the banked allowances in people's accounts right now, I think that's part of this question. We are not going to be looking to take away anyone's banked allowances, but we do have to think about the forward-looking pools of allowances as we think about making the program more stringent.
Great. Okay, with that, we will move to our next commenter. That will be Eric Mintzer. Eric, I have allowed you to unmute yourself. You may now do so and provide your comment.
Hey, this is Eric Mintzer from Gelber Group. My question relates to slide 21, where you mentioned possibly needing to evaluate the price ceiling levels and the APCR levels if you adjust the allowance budget. Can you explain why those are related?
Sure. So if we're going to be updating the allowance budgets and making the program more stringent, which obviously means that you're reducing the caps, removing allowances, that is going, and the demand remains the same because emissions remain where they are at current levels, you could see an increase in prices for allowances in the program. We don't want to trip into the APCR or the price ceiling prematurely. We actually do want to see the program just run as it has been running. So that might mean that we need to lift the prices for the APCR tiers and potentially lift the trigger for the price ceiling. That's what we're really trying to say with that. It's not downward steps in the prices, it's potentially upward, depending on what a stringent program looks like and the cost evaluations look like from the modeling work.
Awesome. Okay, we will move to our next raised hand, which is Ana Garza Buttes. Ana, I have allowed you to unmute yourself. You may now do so, and please provide your comments.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you to the staff for this workshop and for the upcoming work that will be needed to update the cap and trade and MRR regulations. My question for CARB is, will you be engaging in the EPA, with the EPA on its proposed plan to reduce emissions from existing power plants? And more specifically, does CARB intend to use cap and trade as its state plan?
Hi, Ana. Yes, we will be engaging with US EPA, and we are part of both multi-state and single state efforts to send comments back on the plan that is out for comment right now. Just as we did when the CPP was first originally put out there and allowed for a trading program to be a main compliance mechanism, we will be evaluating the use of the cap and trade program under the new rules as well. This work, again, will be coordinated across the energy agencies with us in whatever proposal we submit as our compliance plan for a final rule.
Perfect. We will now move to our next commenter, who is Daniel Ress. Daniel, I have allowed you to unmute yourself. You may now do so, and please provide your comment.
My name is Dan Ress. I'm a staff attorney for the Center on Race, Poverty, and the Environment. We provide low-income communities of color in the San Joaquin Valley with organizing, technical, and legal support in the fight for environmental justice. We're skeptical that the cap and trade program does much work at all on climate, relying on other programs for substantive reductions. From our perspective, its main benefit for climate is the revenue it generates for actual climate programs. At the same time, we're certain that it's doing harm, concentrating pollution in EJ communities. Plentiful research supports this concern, as does the reality of our communities. CARB must consider local harms as it continues to develop the program. The caller from EDF called for certain changes to the program to benefit EJ communities. I will be engaging more to provide our thoughts on exactly what's necessary. But I wanted to name the pushback to that call for EJ protections, that we need to protect the market. Struck me as nonsense. Yes, having a stable market is helpful for generating that revenue in a predictable way, and you're worried about insofar as you might be getting some climate benefits. But what you need to be worried about is protecting human life, seeking justice, and there we need environmental justice protections. We need to make sure this program isn't harming our communities, or assuming that goal is impossible with the program, to at least limit the harm to communities to the extent feasible. So we really do need to work on those protections. I also wanted to point out one specific element that was under consideration, the exempting of biogenic carbon dioxide from burning biofuels and biogas. This strikes me as absurd. Of course, that's climate pollution. The fact that it originally came from, say, cows doesn't make it not climate pollution. So it shouldn't be exempted. And we don't want to incentivize more biogenic carbon dioxide that would be harmful for climate, and certainly for the communities that live near the dairies and near the refineries and near the digesters and so on. So there's harms to climate from such an exemption, and more to the point, really strong local harms. And so we really can't ignore that climate pollution, and we can't incentivize more of it, hurting local communities. So really encourage y'all to really take seriously the environmental justice concerns, and look forward to engaging more to make sure they're addressed well. Thanks.
So I'm just going to respond because there are a couple of things there that warrant some fact checking here. There is a report out by OEHA that does not support the assertion that the cap and trade program is concentrating pollution in any communities throughout the state. There are other academic studies that also support that the air quality in communities has gotten cleaner since the cap and trade program was actually implemented. There is no way to actually correlate or corroborate any implementation activities of cap and trade are leading to any specific outcome of harm. And so those facts need to be out there, and having those assertions out there over and over again actually hurts real climate action that has been supported through legislation such as AB 398 and AB 32 before that. In terms of the facility caps, we have looked at that option. We looked at it in the 2017 scoping plan. We did a full analysis of it alongside with the option of keeping the cap and trade program. That informed AB 398, and the legislature had a chance to weigh in on whether or not facility caps should be part of the program. And at the time, and based on the information that has not changed since then, they did not pursue adding facility caps into this program. And so you can see the economic, health, and air quality benefits in the 2017 scoping plan for a facility cap type of scenario. Additionally, AB 617 is put into place to get at the direct harms that are facing communities. And so the program for GHGs is not the primary tool. It is not designed to be the primary tool to get at the local concerns of air pollution. And those sources are directly under the jurisdiction of air districts. So CARB, under its authority with AB 617, is working directly with the air districts and community members to figure out how to reduce exposure to harmful pollution in those regions. And finally, on methane, I would just like to point out that methane is a higher GWP than CO2. And so any reduction in methane actually is a climate benefit. It is not a disbenefit. And we need to actually keep coming back to the science, and we need to keep coming back to the facts and the work at hand. And I think it's really unhelpful when assertions that don't have data behind them or are not in alignment with the recent science or longstanding science are put out there as talking points. Next, Michael.
Great. Okay, so at this time, we only have one more hand raised. So if anyone else is interested, please feel free to get in the queue. And this person is Colin Suarez. Colin, I have allowed you to unmute, so please provide your name and affiliation and your comment. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the workshop today. Colin Suarez with the Western Propane Gas Association. Well, perfect timing on my question. I was actually about to ask what, under the exemptions for biogenic CO2, what the proposed scope was going to be for that CARB is in discussion, and are there particular sectors that you are looking at specifically under those biogenic CO2s? And I just also, on behalf of those who are rapidly decarbonizing our fuels in areas that are particularly hard to decarbonize, that reducing biogenic CO2 emissions through those fuel sources is one of the most effective ways that we can decarbonize those sectors. So I'll be quiet now and thank you for your time.
Thanks, Colin. So we already exempt some biogenic sources in the cap and trade program from having a compliance obligation. And this is actually working with broader industry and energy providers on additional biogenic sources that may warrant exemptions in the program. And so it is expanding what we already have, really thinking about some of the feedstocks that'll be available when we think about added diversion from landfills and some of the other programs that we have to and targets that we have to achieve in the state. There will be additional workshops on this with additional detail in the future.
Great. Okay, a few more hands have since joined the queue. So next up will be Beverly Deschaux. Beverly, I have allowed you to unmute yourself, so please introduce yourself, provide your affiliation and your comment. Thank you.
Good morning, Beverly Deschaux with the Electric Vehicle Association of Central Coast, California. I was hoping that someone else would comment on this who maybe had more information about it, but I just want to say that the CCS program has been shown to actually use more energy than it's saving, more pollution than it's reducing from the environment. And the energy that's used is fossil fuel produced. So there are other facts, which is why I was waiting for someone else to comment that I am not remembering at the moment, I'm sorry. But I urge you to please investigate the actual savings that CCS has the potential for the environment, because what I have heard is that it is not, in fact, producing what it's intended to do. Thank you.
I think you're talking about CCS. And so on that point, we have SB 905. We will be working through a public process to fully develop that program. I think there has been some incomplete or inaccurate information that has been put out there. The truth is that these projects have actually been around since the 1970s, and there is a detail of the capture efficiency in the scoping plan. But as we work through the process over the next year or so to develop the 905 program, we are going to be looking at these issues in more detail and making sure that there is more literature and more robust information available to support why these technologies are a good tool to keep on the table to help achieve the state's targets.
Great. Our next commenter will be John Costantino. John, I have allowed you to unmute yourself. Please do so and provide your name and affiliation and your comment. Thank you.
Great, John Costantino, and you can hear me? Yeah. So I want to first start on behalf of VERA, the Offset Developers Association, that we appreciate the continued support for offsets. And in CARB highlighted the fact that it's a cost containment mechanism. We would also highlight that there's local and economic co-benefits. It encourages broader participation in the market, enhances private finance, and provides California leadership and exportability. So we don't want to forget that those are some of the other benefits of offsets. Looking forward to the industrial decarb. This is for other folks, actually. Industrial decarb mechanisms, looking forward to what's going to come in the process for that. Want to support the mechanisms for biogenic emission calculations that were listed. So we know that there are some feedstocks that don't currently get credited, which should, so we want to support that. And then I guess my only real question is this rulemaking going to project out past 2030? Thank you.
So what we're talking about here today is the scenarios that we want to evaluate for cost evaluations in the design of the program. Because AB 1279 has been passed and signed into law, we want to look out to 2045. We haven't decided what will go into the final rulemaking, as I noted in my opening comments, but we need to do the work to help inform that eventual rulemaking package. Thank you.
Great. Okay, we'll move to our next commenter, who is Andre Templeman. Andre, I've allowed you to unmute yourself. You may now do so, and please introduce yourself and provide your comment. Thank you.
Hi, it's Andre Templeman from Alpha Inception. Couple of questions for you, Rajinder. First question, I guess. When I look at AB 1279, it suggests, or it doesn't suggest, but it mandates an 85% reduction of the entire economy by 2045. Since cap and trade only covers 85% of the economy, wouldn't it make sense to have cap and trade as the backstop go to zero by 2045, thereby leaving the 15% not covered by cap and trade as a potential that would be reduced by other mechanisms? So I guess wondering why we're not going to zero by 2045 since cap and trade doesn't cover the entire economy. Number two, how do the LCFS targets, which is an ongoing parallel program, affect the new caps for cap and trade? Do you expect that work to be done prior to this work being finalized so that you can implement or put in that as an input into the program, since LCFS targets obviously impact the overall emission levels? And then lastly, just a discussion on linkages to Washington and or New York. Is that something that is being considered? And I know it's not necessarily part of this rulemaking, but are you looking at some of the rules being considered in those other jurisdictions as aligning some of those to California's rules? Those are my three questions.
So the first one, Andre, was about AB 1279 and go to zero. So the 85% anthropogenic emissions is not all completely included in the cap and trade program. There are still sources in the AB 32 inventory that do not have a compliance obligation. And so what we end up doing out to 2045 will be informed by some of the work that we did in the scoping plan and looking at all of the sectors there and what is included and not included over time. For LCFS, that rulemaking is moving ahead. It will be going to the board before the cap and trade program updates are actually put out for public comment and go to the board. In terms of informing cap and trade, of course, we want to know what LCFS is going to look like. The good thing is that the same people that are helping to work on the scoping plan are also in the LCFS program. And so we can pull a lot of the work from the scoping plan right now to help do some of the analyses and adjust later depending on where LCFS ends up being and what its final version is when it's adopted. On linkages, of course, we have conversations with our colleagues in other states, and there's information sharing. There's design elements that we have to explain as to why we made certain decisions and implementation experience that we share along the way. But as I said before, this rulemaking currently is focused on what we need to do for California. And I want to be clear about why we want to make sure we have the California regs in place in a form that actually aligns with where we need to be. There is federal funding sitting out there that we want to be able to tap into to make sure that projects and transitions to clean energy can happen sooner at lower cost to Californians by leveraging those federal incentives and federal opportunities, which means having clear rules developed and adopted for cap and trade and LCFS and other programs as soon as possible to inform investment, inform those grant opportunities and incentive opportunities. Thanks.
Awesome. Okay, we will now move to our next commenter, who is Facundo Smufer. I have now allowed you to unmute yourself. Please introduce yourself, provide your name and affiliation, and your comment.
Hi, this is Facundo Smufer. So we're seeing an increase on the voluntary markets, but also some hybrid schemes, like is the case of Corsia. So my question is, do you think there is a chance for further integration with the voluntary market, for example, to supply the carbon offsets demand? Thanks.
That is a great question. Happy to share our observations on the voluntary market. We looked at the voluntary markets in their nascent stages when we developed our program, decided that the voluntary markets didn't have the rigor that was needed for a compliance offset program. Our program was nevertheless challenged in court, and we were able to successfully litigate that our program did meet high stringency and high requirements. We're seeing that in the voluntary market, there is a lot of critique of different voluntary schemes by NGOs, academics, and others. We do not see a role for the voluntary market in its current form to help be part of the compliance program. The voluntary market at some point needs to mature where there is a single set of standards that say this is the baseline for all voluntary offsets. And so that there isn't this race or disaggregate kind of field where people can generate voluntary offsets and put those out there and then risk the kind of criticisms that we're seeing.
Great. Okay, we will now move to our next commenter, who is Thomas Ray. Thomas, I've allowed you to unmute yourself. Please introduce yourself, provide your affiliation and your comment. Thanks.
Hi there. Thanks again for the workshop here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, indeed.
All right. Thomas Ray here with Quantix. I'm curious, so when could, quick question, when could an increase to a 48% reduction actually be written into law? Feasibly.
You mean in statute?
Correct.
So the legislature can act on that anytime they choose to do it. There is no limit or guidepost that is in place for them to take that kind of action. But we have the opportunity to go beyond that if we want to. There's nothing that says in SB 32 that we can't go above the 40%. The language is at least 40% by 2030.
Okay, I'm not sure if Thomas may have re-raised his hand to provide a secondary question. So since Thomas, you didn't, oh, Thomas put his hand down. Okay, that answers that. Okay, so at this time, we only have one more commenter left in the queue, and that is Faria Ali. So Faria, I have allowed you to unmute yourself. Please introduce yourself, provide your affiliation and your comment. Thank you.
Hi, this is Faria Ali with Pacific Gas and Electric. I wanted to thank you all for providing the workshop today. The question that I had is, can you provide a little bit, or can you provide anything more in terms of estimated timing for this rulemaking process? For example, are you anticipating the formal rulemaking process could begin sometime this year, or is that more likely to begin in 2024? If there's anything more that you can share on that, that would be great. Thank you.
Sure, Faria. Yes, the formal rulemaking process could start this year. Like I said, we are trying to make sure that we have our regs in place as soon as possible to make sure we can leverage that federal funding to help support any increased ambition that we see as being needed here.
Great. Okay, we have one additional hand raised, and that is Keith Adams. Okay, Keith, I have allowed you to unmute yourself, so please introduce yourself, provide your affiliation and your comment. Not sure if Keith can hear us. Keith, are you there? I believe you should be able to unmute. Unsure what.
Okay, sorry,
Oh,
I got
there
it
we go.
now. Thank you. Didn't see that extra button. Okay, Keith Adams with Climeco. And my question relates to slide 25, where you speak about evaluating potential measures to address industrial emission leakage. And so I'm curious as to what's on the table. What are the potential measures that are being considered? Is there something along the line of a state version of a border adjustment on specific industrial products or what have you? So just an opportunity to elaborate on that if you can.
I think this is an area that we'll welcome comments on. I'm also part of an effort on Senate Bill 596, which is related to the developing a net zero emission strategy for the cement sector. And that legislation is asking us to take a look at a border carbon adjustment mechanism in the context of specific to the cement sector. We know that we have looked at that type of mechanism in the past and recognized some of the challenges related to the Dormant Commerce Clause, related to some WTO rules related to trade, and also related to data sources. So we know there are some technical challenges and legal challenges that need to be overcome. We've also been, observing the process on the EU ETS related to the development of the CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism there, which was, a long process but recently adopted. So that type of mechanism, is something that is being discussed, and would welcome your comments on that. And I think there will be, following on when we get information from our specific leakage studies, some further conversations there. So more to come on those, including some meetings and workshops.
Great. So at this time, I don't see any other additional hands raised. Oh, one hand just came in, and that is from Ruben Lubowski. Okay, Ruben, I have allowed you to unmute yourself. Please introduce yourself, provide your affiliation and your comment. Thank you. Ruben, I'm not sure if you're speaking, but I can't hear you. Although it says you're off mute, so. Okay, unfortunately, Ruben may be facing some technical difficulties. Well, we'll remind that we are also accepting written comment. So feel free to provide your comment at the link below there on the slide. So maybe I'll give Ruben one more chance here to unmute. But if this doesn't work, then we can wrap up here.
Hello?
There you go. Hi, Ruben. Ruben, we can hear you now if you want to provide your comment. Okay, perhaps not, but we did get one additional hand up. Ruben, if you figure out the technical difficulties, feel free to get back in the queue, but otherwise we will move to Teresa Lang. Teresa, I have allowed you to unmute yourself, so please introduce yourself, provide your affiliation and your comments. Thank you.
Hi, this is Teresa Lang from A New Climate, the merger of longtime offset developers and market participants, Blue Source and Element Markets, for those who haven't heard our name yet. Thank you to the CARB staff for your presentation, and we really look forward to kicking off this rulemaking. I also want to thank CARB for highlighting the importance of offsets as a cost containment mechanism, as well as echo the previous speaker, John Constantino's comments on the other co-benefits of offsets beyond cost containment. Really the ability for it to drive private finance to invest in emission reductions, ability for emission reductions and sequestration opportunities outside of the state's borders, and really the other co-benefits to local communities where these projects take place. I also wanted to follow up on John's previous question and Rajinder's response about post-2030. Rajinder pointed to, as well as the slides in the presentation, how important a stable market is to the overall program. And in Rajinder's response to John's question, she pointed to the fact that the work hadn't yet happened and that we would be looking at, or CARB would be looking at, the analysis for post-2030, what cap and trade would look like then. I just want to encourage CARB to really consider the fact that certainty to the market of whether cap and trade will extend beyond 2030 is crucially important to offset projects, such as projects under the Forestry Protocol, where we're looking at 100-year permanence and getting landowners to really consider making those decisions to do an offset project under the compliance program, considering what things look like post-2030 is really important. And so getting certainty about extension of the cap and trade program beyond 2030 is really important. So if there's any additional detail you can provide on that today, that would be really helpful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for the comments, Teresa. We don't have any additional comments to share back, but your point is taken about long-term certainty.
Great. Okay, so we do have one additional hand, and that is Clayton Munnings. Clayton, I have allowed you to unmute yourself, so please introduce yourself, provide your affiliation and your comment.
Hey, this is Clayton Munnings with the International Emissions Trading Association. Just to make a few comments. First, we're really looking forward to engage in CARB and the informal workshop process, including the commenting period. Second, just wanted to express support for what Rajinder said earlier about the allowance bank, and that is not touching the accounts of folks who currently hold allowances is very important, and having any changes be kind of future looking into future supplies of allowances is also very important. This isn't only for market operation, it's also just for the robustness of the allowance price, greenhouse gas revenues, and also just certainty for investors looking to reduce emissions via projects in California. The last point I wanted to mention was on whether cap and trade increases local air emissions, particularly in disadvantaged communities. As one commenter noted, there are a lot of studies out there on this topic. AWEA has done a study, as Rajinder mentioned. AIDA's read of the literature here is that there is no evidence that cap and trade increases local air emissions. And in fact, the study that we like and agree with the best for methodological reasons shows that the program has reduced local air emissions causally, at least at a small sample of 50 industrial sites. So just wanted to refer all the listeners to a CARB fact sheet that I think does a really good job distilling the academic literature, and also highlight that the upcoming IMAC meeting will feature two scholars on June 20th, two scholars who've done work on this question of whether cap and trade has changed local air emissions. So I think that will be a very interesting discussion. Of course, that's separate from how can the cap and trade program be designed to kind of further reduce local air emissions, and AIDA does not have an opinion on that, on the particular ways that should be done. I think that's a topic for future conversation. But just wanted to weigh in and be clear that our view is the program has actually reduced local air emissions, not increased local air emissions. Thanks.
Thanks for the comment.
Okay, well, it looks like we have no additional hands in the queue. So in that case, I believe we will conclude our public comment session for the workshop this morning. And I will now turn it over to Mark, I believe, to provide some closing remarks.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Michael, for and to Camille for conducting the workshop at the staff level. Thank you to Rajinder and our Quebec colleagues for joining us today for the joint California-Quebec Cap and Trade Programs workshop. And also importantly, thank you all for your participation and your feedback. It's good discussion already. We're early, but we really appreciate this initial feedback. You see on the screen here that we will have a comment docket open through July 7th for you to submit written comments. So that will be available to you at the link. And just encourage you to provide your comments there. We look forward to reviewing what you do submit. There will be additional workshops on the horizon and additional discussions. So thank you in advance for your participation there. And I believe this will conclude our workshop. We're ending early. Thank you so much.